Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic, and we have a Love is Blind story to share with you guys. In the world of reality TV, there's nothing like dumping the receipts after the reunion of the show to vindicate yourself. Is Zack vindicated? He shares his receipts. They might not be the type you or I expected. Follow me on Instagram at DNeals. We're going to get to the story right now. Zack sharing his receipts. Of course, here he is 4 days ago posting eternal bliss. Him and his wife, Bliss here, maybe living happily ever after. But now that we know he's in a happy relationship, let's go back and check out a few words of caution he gave us, and then I'm going to share with you guys his receipts that are right here. Here are Zack Kwiatkowski's receipts, and let's get to just a couple of videos of him asking us, the rabid audience of reality TV consumers, to have a little grace.
Hey everybody, it's Zack from Love is Blind, and I just wanted to thank everybody who has supported me or sent positive messages already to me and other members of the cast. It's meant so much. And we are just a few hours away from season 4. You guys are going to be in for a treat. Let me tell you, it is a lot. We all went through a lot, and it was an incredible, unbelievable experience. I mean, surreal. So, with that said, I just had one request for my friends, my family, and fans. When you watch this show, there are going to be people that you're going to like, and there are going to be people that you're not going to like. And there may be people who say things to me or other members of the cast that are hurtful. There may be people who do things that are hurtful. And I just would ask that you show them grace. And if you're a friend of mine, a fan of mine, and you want to attack somebody because of something they said or did on the show, please don't. Honestly, just say a prayer for them and send them a positive message. Hey everybody, it's Zack from...
So there it is. Pleading with people, please show some grace. Now, of course, 99% of the audience does, but it's those 1% that say some horrible things. And I know, you can only imagine how delusional some people are to think that this is reality. People say and do weird and or strange things in these reality shows due to a number of reasons. Anxiety, the cameras are on them, sleep deprivation, a little bit of alcohol, so many different things. So here are Zack's receipts. Of course, we know his relationship with Irina did not go well. She was portrayed as a villain in the sense of mean things and was pretty mean girl on the season. He broke up with her in Mexico and then, of course, found bliss, and they have been happily ever after. But I wanted to read what he had to say. The receipts. If there's anything you remember about me, this is what I hope you remember. I believe all life is redeemable, and the one thing we all need is grace. Warning, the following story discusses the topic of mental illness and suicide. I already know on this Transformational Tuesday that I'm going to have a hard time reading this. I get emotional reading these things, you know what I mean? Just because we are so guilty of judging people on their face value, who they are, how they present themselves to us, and we don't get to see their journey that led them to that point. Zack, from all accounts, it seems, has led a pretty incredible life to get him to the perspective he has now. You know, I was having a conversation recently with a family member about my deceased father, who was a Vietnam vet, and he was absentee, and we weren't raised by him and didn't know much about him. But it was very easy. It's easy to just be mad at him for the way he was or everything he lacked. But it really takes that extra level of critical thinking or love to wonder how abandoned he was in his time of need. And, you know, being a veteran of a war that, you know, people were, not approving of, and, you know, that whole thing, you know what I mean? So it really, like, we can have grace. Oh, it's easy to have grace for someone like, you know, that's a fan favorite, but can we really operate with that same muscle with someone we truly didn't like from the show? You know, some people can, some people can't. So here's what Zack had to say. My senior year in high school, I was filled with anger and rage. My mother's mental illness and addiction were out of control. Sometimes I would come home and my entire room would be destroyed, walls smashed with a hammer, clothes thrown about after my mother had gone into a manic state. As a teenager, I would do anything to avoid going home. And as soon as I got home, I would lock myself in my room. Sometimes my mother would disappear for days and I wouldn't know where she or my sister were. By the time I got to high school, I lost track of how many schools and how many different homes I had lived in. There was no stability. Every time I made a friend, I'd have to move on and say goodbye. I didn't understand mental illness. I didn't understand addiction. I was angry. Angry that I had to say goodbye to so many friends, angry that I couldn't bring my friends over, angry for all the times I had to sit there at night listening to my mother fight with her boyfriends, fight with my stepdad, angry about all the times I had to watch the cops come to our house, angry about the nights where my mother would threaten to kill herself and having to lay at home not knowing if the next day I wouldn't have a mother. The night my mother dedicated the song I Hope You Dance to me, we had a huge argument. She was not mentally well, drove her car and parked it in the front yard. Then she came in our home and began screaming at my friends. I left and she threatened to kill herself if I didn't come back. So I did. That's when she dedicated this song that would be the first dance at my wedding. One day during my senior year, a girl in my government class invited me to go to a youth group at her church. It was a bit of a bait and switch. I had no idea a sermon was involved. I really just came to play some rock band and hang out with other kids my age, but I kept going because I felt a sense of belonging. And it was the pastor that led the youth group who told me a story about a man who sacrificed everything so that others could be forgiven. That story made me realize what it means to give grace. The idea that a parent would take on the punishment that their child deserved, not because it was just, but out of love, changed something inside of me. It was in that moment that I chose to forgive my mother. Truly forgive her, and that choice changed my life. Fast forward 3 years, I'm entering my junior year in college. My mother had been committed several times and lost custody of my little sister. It was the end of the summer, and I had just left Portland volunteering at a homeless shelter. I spent my time there not handing out food, but listening to the stories of men and women who were at rock bottom. And it was in listening to their stories that I realized something that shook me to my core. I heard the story of a woman who was abandoned by her family and thrown out on the street, sexually assaulted several times, and then killed herself by jumping off a bridge. I heard the story of a father addicted to drugs who lost his job and was living on the streets of Portland. I asked him if his children knew how he was doing. He told me that he lied to them and didn't let them know. And that's when the light bulb went off. I hadn't seen my mother in almost 6 months. Every time I tried to meet with her, she would make up an excuse and avoid me. It was in that moment that I realized that my mother was homeless and she was hiding from me because she didn't want me to see how bad she had gotten. I remember driving back home and crying, looking down at the ground for a second and praying to God that I would get to see my mother. She hadn't answered my phone calls for over a week. And shortly after I said that prayer, I looked down on my phone to see a missed call from her. I picked up the phone and called her. When she finally answered, I told her that I wanted to see her the next day. With that, I drove across the state of Washington to a little town in the middle of nowhere. When I arrived, I got another call from my mother. She said she was feeling sick and couldn't make it. I told her I didn't care how sick she was. She needed to come see me, and she did. When I saw her, her face was gaunt. She looked like she hadn't eaten or slept in weeks. I sat down with my mother that day. I hugged her, and I told her I forgave her for everything. She had still not forgiven herself. She was living at the time in a storage unit using a space heater at night to keep warm. She was at rock bottom, and she didn't want me to know. I prayed with her that day. I prayed that she would overcome her addiction. I prayed she would be able to overcome her mental illness. And I told her how much I loved her. And it was after that day that everything changed. My mother, miraculously, after decades of being unable to work, decades struggling with addiction and mental illness, she recovered. She finally got clean after relapse and relapse. After being committed numerous times, they finally got her medication stabilized. She got better with the support of my grandmother and my aunts. They never gave up on her, never stopped believing in her. She spent the rest of her life serving the mentally and physically disabled, and it was after that moment my sister and I finally got to have a few normal Christmases together. They were the happiest moments of my life. They are moments that I never would have gotten if I held on to the pain of the past and chosen not to forgive. Grace isn't fair, but if we choose to give it every day, we make the world a better place for everyone. When I was going through my mother's things after she died, I found a small note. It was dated shortly after the day I sat down with her in that small town in the middle of nowhere. It said somehow she found a little hope in her hopelessness. We all can be someone's hope in the hopelessness. And then there are the receipts. Pretty powerful stuff, huh, folks? So I understand Other people on the show have shared their receipts, kind of vindicating themselves or proving that the edit was wrong or sharing their side. And I understand why people need to share the receipts, because as an audience, we're wildly judgmental. Prove something to me or I will believe otherwise. And to see Zack use the idea of receipts, the idea of sensationalized, clickbaity, drama, the parasocial relationship of what we watch on the show with the citations of what actually went down, to use that to bring an audience into his story, that's impressive stuff. Share some grace, folks, especially when you really don't think you have any to share. It's in there. All right, we'll be back with more content after this.